Hello everyone and welcome to the first Careers Launch online event. My name is Jacob Smith. I am a volunteer for UK SEDS and I will be your host for today's webinar. For those of you who aren't aware of UK SEDS, we are the UK's National Student Space Society. We are a group of students and young professionals who run all sorts of space-related events and competitions. Tickets for our National Student Space Conference next March in Birmingham have just gone on sale today, so look out for those. And we also operate an early careers website called spacecareers.uk. These webinars are run by the spacecareers.uk team and are designed to educate on careers in the space sector. Now, before we begin, there's a few things I'd like to make you aware of. Firstly, a recording of this webinar will be available on the UK SEDS YouTube channel shortly afterwards. Secondly, we'd love to hear from you. If you're on Twitter, use the Careers Launch Online hashtag. And if you scroll down on this website, we'll have a live chat for you to use to interact with each other during the presentation. I do apologise that this live chat won't work on mobile. But if you can use it, let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know if you're in a group viewing and how many there are of you watching together. The presentation will last about 20 minutes. We'll then have a 20-minute Q&A session. You can submit your questions in the Q&A box on this page and we'll ask some of those to Tom. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Tom Kelly is a co-founder of We Are Quattro. He has 9 years experience in recruitment, 5 of which is recruiting into the global space sector, and he is passionate about playing an important role in enabling the growth of the global new space sector. So, it's great to have him present with us all today, so thank you, Tom. For those of you just joining us, hello and welcome, and I'll now hand over to Tom for the presentation.
Thank you for that. Nice to meet everybody. So welcome to this. First of all, this is something that's very important for me. My careers advice when I was in school through to university was awful. In fact, it didn't really exist. I was told that I would be a fisherman, and anybody that's ever met me will know that I definitely would not suit being a fisherman. My hands are way too small and soft to start with. Nothing against fishermen, but for me, having set up this recruitment company, I think this is a real opportunity for me to really spread the word on space and really help to use it as a context to hopefully inspire people into the sector. So who are we? Because our name doesn't necessarily scream that we do recruitment for the space sector. So first of all, there's the four of us, hence the name. This was on a holiday just before we set up the business, and it was very nice. It was very relaxing. It was a little bit kind of, the calm before the storm, really. But yeah, so we came back to Bristol and we set up our recruitment company, but we all had kind of different backgrounds. So engineering, tech, sales, etc. And we all knew that we wanted to kind of use our recruitment skills to really make a difference on the planet. And, I think space plays a major part in that. So we are now at 8 people. There we are. A few of us not wearing socks. So I think what we've grown in the last year to 8 people, and we recruit literally all over the world. So this space, I'm not sure about anybody else that currently is involved in the space sector, but whenever I say that we recruit into the space sector, I normally get this face, and then people are like, right, okay. So what's the space sector? I think there's a big misunderstanding actually of space, with people thinking, it's just astronauts and it's just these crazy kind of things which are far out into space. And, in reality, it's really not. And, I guess a good example of that would be looking at these slides. So One Planet, 7 Worlds is a program that hopefully a lot of people have seen. Without the intel from satellites, Sir David would not be able to have a bit of a go at us about what we're doing to the planet at the moment. And as well, it's the intel from these spacecraft which allows us to really track what's happening on the planet, where the animals are, etc. If you look at Uber, without the use of a spacecraft, you wouldn't be able to call for an Uber, and when you're in the Uber, they wouldn't be able to use their phones, because location-based services is an absolutely massive part of the market. Just just about that up as well. Another company here, I'm not sure about anybody else. I put on a lot of weight when this company first arrived on the scene. Again, without the use of a spacecraft, they simply wouldn't be able to track where they are. So these are kind of examples of companies really which actually are space companies. It's just that you wouldn't really think about it. And when you first say the word space and people pull that face, these are some good examples of where actually it is a lot more than that. Other kind of areas which I think people might have touched on maybe in their degrees or kind of hot areas at the moment, really, things like 5G, things like smart cities, Internet of Things. All of these areas really are not going to be made possible without the use of space. And I'll talk shortly about some organizations that we're working with who really kind of bring these technologies to life through the use of space. Internet of Things. This is something that is just going to be a fundamental part of life, and it's been a long time in the making. A good example of that would be that your fridge will tell you when you've run out of food. And without being able to use spacecraft to really speed up the comms, these areas wouldn't really exist. Now, bit controversial, but this is obviously a wall. This wall should never have been there in the first place. And this for me is a good analogy about the space sector. It's like when you talk about space and new space, people think that it's so far removed from reality, but it's really, really, really not. The space sector is huge. It needs people, and we kind of need to bring the wall down. And it's just not something that really should have been there in the first place. So why are we focused on space? So look, first of all, space is more than astronauts. I think space is that's pretty much what most people think. And in actual fact, it's a sector where without it, we wouldn't be able to have the maps on our phones. I'm not sure about anybody else, but I personally would be lost literally all the time. It's the most important thing for me and the kind of culture that I've noticed in the sector so far is that it's really a sector that encourages people from all different walks of life. So we placed the guy from Morocco into Glasgow. We've also placed somebody from Brazil over to Singapore. And, it's a fully multicultural global space sector where companies have literally so many different people from so many different areas in their organizations. And I think it's so far removed from like some of the traditional old school organizations which are having issues in this particular area because they only have one type of person in their businesses. But space is already ahead of the curve in really trying to tackle that. As well, I think it's really one of the only sectors where it's a cool tech sector, but there's kind of an undertone that all the work that you're doing is there to help to try to improve Earth, and that gives it a very, very, very nice feel when you're in the sector. So what I'd like to do now is just talk through some of the organisations that we work with, because when I was at university, I kind of wish that I'd known about some of the companies that were hiring, what skills they were looking for, and what the companies did, because it would have inspired me a little bit more, I guess. So Lift Me Off, excellent name for a business. We work with these guys. These are set up by a guy that worked in the Netherlands. He's just moved over to the UK, and they're in the Harwell campus, which is over in Oxfordshire. That particular campus now has about 93 space companies. I say that hesitating because it seems to be increasing literally every day. But these guys, for me, really define new space. So new space is pretty much to do with the use of low Earth orbit spacecraft. So these are low Earth orbit spacecraft in a constellation closely wrapped around the Earth so that we can really study it. And this particular business do mission management where their small spacecraft is like a robot, which will be in low Earth orbit, and it will move around and it will maneuver small satellites, and it will do servicing on satellites and move the satellites around. And it's such a cool business. And these guys wouldn't even exist without the low Earth orbit side of space, which didn't even exist maybe 10 years ago. So it just shows how fast this part of the sector is moving. These guys recently hired a mechanical design engineer through us. They're looking for more salespeople, marketing people. So it's a good example of kind of quite a broad spectrum of people that these guys look to hire. So Spire, I'm a bit biased, but I think this company are amazing. They are what we would call a full platform space business. So they will design, build, and launch their own spacecraft, and then they'll collect all the information from the spacecraft once they're in orbit, and then they'll package it and sell it. So ultimately, software as a service derived from their own spacecraft, which they've designed and built. I've been to Glasgow. It's quite funny, really. They are in very modern offices, but then underneath, almost in like a layer, they build all the spacecraft. And you're walking past the office, you would just never know it's there. But underground, they're making these really, really cool things. But yeah, so they have three main use cases, really. So when it comes to selling their data, the first one is to do with tracking where ships are out at sea. So they'll be tracking where marine vessels are in real time, and then they'll use AI and machine learning to work out where they will be in the future. The second part of it is to do with space weather and weather on Earth. So this is really helping to kind of tackle climate change, to really predict natural disasters before they happen. And that, again, is an example of just a very cool, very young business. They started in 2012. They've got 180 people across 5 different countries, but they're using the tech to help to improve Earth. The third area is to do with aerospace and just helping to track where planes are at any one point. But yeah, they're a very cool business. They are recruiting for every role that you could ever imagine, from marketing, HR, software, hardware, electrical, business development, sales, literally, you name it, this business will be hiring for it. So the third company down, these guys are based in Switzerland. I've put them on here because they're a good example, again, of the growing kind of downstream part of the sector. They recruit for data scientists, full stack web developers, marketing and salespeople, and they're basically taking data from space and they're using it for agri-tech, which is basically technology to help the agriculture sector track where things are, and crucially at the moment, to not make any mistakes. The bottom company, a very, very cool company. They are based out of Spain, but again, they have an office here in the UK. They use a radar which is called SAR, and SAR allows you to be able to see through clouds. So for the UK, it's ideal. It's actually quite a nice day today, but on a normal day, they allow you to see through clouds and to see at night. And what these guys are doing is they're using that to tackle the plastic in the oceans, but also to track the melting of the ice caps. So again, using tech to help solve issues on Earth. I won't go through the other companies because we haven't got too long, but Scientists are in Bristol, amazing company. Pacific are over in Singapore. The reason why I mention a company from Singapore actually is because a lot of countries around the world, the visa process is very straightforward, and actually talented people like yourselves should really consider a worldwide approach when you're looking for a job, because most of these companies are hiring, and when you go to places like Singapore, it's quite straightforward to get a visa. Nanoracks are over in the US, very exciting, very large, established NewSpace business. And the guys at the bottom, Statixfy, again, a very cool company. They are using ASICs. So some people might know this, some people might not, but in your mobile phone is an ASIC as a chip because it's super, super fast. Again, because of the need for Internet of Things, smart cities, autonomous vehicles, all these cool things we're hearing about, you just won't be able to use them without the space sector. And these guys are designing the chips that will be used in satellites so that the satellites can be fast enough to be able to handle these sectors. Again, recruiting for roles across the board. So there's a bit of an insight into some of the companies that are in the new space sector. So what sort of roles we play? So we split this really into upstream, and then on the other side, it's all about the data that we get from satellites. So upstream is anything to do with the design, build, and launch of anything that goes into space, robot, satellite, spacecraft, anything. And then on the downstream side, it's all about the data that we get from the satellites and how we package that data and then how we sell it. So there's a lot of roles here. I won't go into them in too much detail. However, it's worth just pointing out a few. Not relevant for anybody doing a computer science degree, anything to do with electronics, embedded software, hardware. These roles really, these companies are crying out for you guys. So if you have skills in those areas, please look to consider NewSpace companies, definitely. Moving down a little bit, software, that kind of does what it says on the tin, but the product assurance manager position for me is very interesting because this is a part of the sector that's very, very, very important, but not many people have the skills for this job. It's a bit of an older market, and the people won't mind me saying this. I've got a few friends that work in this part of the sector, but this role really is effectively convincing customers that the product that they've ordered will meet their expectations based on your inspections and what you have worked out that the product needs to be. So it's quite a cool job, and this is applicable to people from technical and non-technical backgrounds, but that's an area, very, very high salaries, very, very high rates if you're a contractor, where there just are not the people. Mechanical design speaks for itself. Business development, it's a bit of a shout out to anybody doing business development as a degree. The talent acquisition, perfect for people doing HR or people-related degrees. There's some more niche stuff down there, so optical and propulsion. But the downstream side is it's obviously all very, very interesting, but for me, it's a very interesting part of it because this part of the sector is the area that's growing the most at the moment. And the roles, as you'll see, are so diverse. So, any kind of web developers, this part of the sector needs you. Marketing professionals, commercial people, because we've got this abundance of data from these low Earth orbit spacecraft, but ultimately we don't really know how to really monetize this. So there's some companies that might be focused on the energy sector, so taking data from space to benefit energy companies. I mentioned some before about the agritech and the plastics in the oceans, but what these companies really want is they want the data scientists to collect the data. They then want the web developers to turn that into a platform that's usable. And they then need the sales and the marketing people to really sell and market that product. And these companies are everywhere, and they're cool. And a lot of them are going to do very, very well. But without people, they will struggle. Some more sales roles, some geospatial positions, but hopefully that gives people a bit of an insight really into the sorts of roles that we're placing and where the demand is. So what skills are required? So this is it's quite a tough area to cover, and we're going to do a lot more of these sessions, and I think it'd be good to delve into this one in a lot more detail in another session. But just to kind of home in on one very important point that we're finding is that when these NewSpace companies are recruiting, when they're interviewing, they're not just looking for like a tick list of skills. So whether it's a propulsion role, a marketing role, whatever it is, they're not just like, right, yeah, so they've done that in marketing, they've done that in marketing, that when it comes to propulsion, they're like, right, yeah, they've done that. It's a lot of it is around the soft skills and the emotional intelligence. Now, you can't really teach emotional intelligence. It's something that you kind of either have or you don't. But what you can do is you can look at the behaviors which exist in people with high levels of this, and then try to replicate it. Or when you're doing your degrees, or when you're thinking about your experience outside of your degrees, try to imagine ways that you can demonstrate this on your CV or when you're interviewing. And some examples of that are problem equals solution. It's like, how do you come up with a solution when you don't have much resources? How can you think outside the box? How can you be adaptable? How can you be versatile? And this is really the common theme that these companies are looking for. It's people that are scrappy. That's the word that a lot of these companies are using. And it's about how can you really, work with minimal information to get a result. The more that you guys can demonstrate this, the better chance you'll have of securing a job in these companies. Another point is people that where no task is too small. People who boast about their IQs are losers. Bit of a quote there from a very intelligent person. I think you need to be prepared when you go into these companies to clean the windows 1 minute, and then the next minute you might be talking to a stakeholder. And I think being able to demonstrate that versatility in as many ways as possible, especially on your CV, will definitely make a big difference. So look, thank you very much for taking the time out. Going to be answering some questions now. Our confirmation is there, and I'm being this honestly. If anybody just wants any advice on the market or anything to do with writing your CV, or in any way that can help, please just let us know. We think that STEM could do with a bit of a rebrand. We think that STEM is actually about as cool as it gets, but the perception isn't necessarily there. So we're really invested in trying to help students understand the new space sector and land jobs that are amazing. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you, Tom. That's a really insightful presentation. It's fascinating to see the huge variety of both technical and non-technical roles in the space sector. Space is one of the fastest growing sectors of the UK economy, and there's truly meaningful work for everyone to get involved with. So we'll now move on to the Q&A session. If you could submit questions through the Q&A box on the website. We've had a good number come through already, so hopefully we'll have time to ask them all. If not, I apologise, but we'll follow up on those afterwards. So if we get started. So a question come in from Steph. Are there companies that are interested in people with satellite data processing skills? And if so, who are these companies?
Okay, cool. That's a very good question. First of all, if you've got those skills, it's your lucky day, because there are a lot of these businesses around. So on the downstream side that I mentioned, there are a lot of companies at the moment taking this abundance of satellite data, which can be in many forms. So I mentioned to you a company using SAR, which is simply a type of radar, which means that you can see through clouds. It's becoming very popular, but there are other kinds of data which comes from space. So image, it's a company called SEN, who are in London, who are going to stream from space. The processing of data is massively important, because obviously the neater that you organize and process the data, the easier it is for the web developers to then put that into a platform. The better the platform, the easier it is for the sales and the marketing guys to sell it. The more they sell, the better the companies do. So yes, these skills are in very high demand. The sorts of companies that I would look out for are Earth observation businesses. So if you have a search online for Earth observation companies, there's plenty over on the Harwell campus. There's plenty all over the world. But I would certainly say the companies that I mentioned, ISARDSat for sure, the guys in Switzerland for sure, but also a lot of the larger space companies will be looking to hire for these skills as well. So Thales Linear Space, OHB, Airbus Svensson Space, they all have Earth observation type departments. But certainly, yes, that particular part of the market is in extremely high demand.
Brilliant. So the next question. So someone who is doing a bachelor's degree in engineering, do you recommend in general, maybe not just engineering, but other subjects as well, is it easier to get into the industry with a master's degree, or can they do it with a bachelor's?
It's a very good question, that. So they won't mind me saying this, but two of our co-founders don't even have A-levels, and yet we're in a company that's doing extremely well. Everybody's engaged and everybody can contribute to the same level. So I think the more education you have, the better. I think as a blanket rule. But I think when you're looking at companies such as NewSpace, I think that your adaptability, your willingness to learn, and what you do outside of education is just as important. So, if you're doing engineering, of course, it depends on the type of engineering. It could be electronics, it could be structural, it could literally be anything. But I'd say yes. If you find something that you're genuinely interested in and passionate about, then do a master's and do whatever education that you want. But don't do it for the sake of it because you feel like you should. Only do it if it's something that you absolutely love. Because otherwise, you'll be able to find a company that will be hiring who will still hire you. And if they're doing something that you love, then you'll be able to contribute more there. So I think that's a very, very important point. Now, I'm talking about NewSpace here. If we look at traditional space, which, I started my career in a very large business, and it was amazing because the structure that gave me to really build the foundations for my career was amazing. But I think when you're looking at these more traditional space companies, there may be a requirement that you have a certain level of degree, and that's fine. But like I say, the overall message is just make sure it's something that you're genuinely passionate about.
Very wise words there. Next question. What advice would you give to someone who's 17 or 18 and are doing their A-levels now to get into something like astrophysics or physics? Or what general advice would you give to someone that age looking to get into the space industry?
So there's a few layers to that question. So somebody doing their A-levels, then going into astrophysics to then get into the space sector. My advice would be to actually look at the end goal first. It's like, what part of the space sector are you interested in? Because the space sector needs people with all different skills. Now, if it happens to be astrophysics, then great. You should do some research into what A-levels would be best suited for that. My advice, if you are intelligent enough, I certainly wasn't. That's why I now do recruitment into the space sector. I would have loved to have been an engineer, but the truth of the matter is that my maths at A-levels just wasn't strong enough. So if you have those abilities in the core subjects, then I certainly stick to those for your A-levels, and then have a look at the universities, so Cranfield, Surrey, etc., where there are decent space programs. And then, as I say, it's all about trying to do things outside of education as well, which are relevant. There's plenty of competitions that you can enter. There's things that you can do online just to really show that you're really passionate about the space sector. And then after that, you'll then be able to land a job in the space sector. But the whole message here is that we kind of need to remove this wall of people thinking that it has to be this super intense, specific degree to be able to enter the space sector. That's not the case. You can enter it with any degree. So, if that's your area of expertise, brilliant. Follow it through, find a good uni, get a job in space. If there's other things you're more passionate about, then I would say follow those, because you'll still be able to get a job in the space sector. The sector's growing so fast, we need all different kinds of people.
Great. So following on from that, looking a bit further down the line, so we've got a question. As a PhD student, how can I make myself relevant to a company in industry, especially NewSpace?
Depends what your PhD's in. The guy that we placed from Morocco into Glasgow, he was doing free space optics. Now, I was thinking about, perhaps it's one for a later date, but in another one of these sessions to really talk about what are the specific, very hot areas and hot topics at the moment, because the sector has been disrupted with low Earth orbit considerably. And that is meaning that new skills are starting to emerge all the time. So a good example of that is that spacecraft predominantly have always used RF. They're now starting to use more optics. Again, it really depends on what your PhD is, but my advice would be to check out some of the space companies that are in this presentation. Feel free to call us to talk to us about your PhD, and we'll be able to tell you which companies are relevant. We actually only recruit for the senior end of the market, but this is purely just to help you out. But again, it depends. Really, really, really does depend on the PhD. But again, find something that you're really passionate about. There are some hot topics in the space sector, like I say, so optics. We're now looking at ASICs rather than FPGAs. From a marketing perspective, it's multi-channel, multifaceted. And again, on my last slide, what I talked about the soft skills and the versatility, and try to be a part of a very small, very complex system, as opposed to in your PhD, just working on a very small cog of what is a very large system. I hope that makes sense. But the people that worked on the entirety of a smaller system are the people that are definitely more of interest. So when it comes to software, do full stack. If it comes to marketing, do every different channel. Just try to be as broad as possible, but on a small, complex system.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for all the questions coming in. There's a nice variety we're getting. So we'll see if Tom can answer this one. So what opportunities are there for people looking to do medical research to do with space, or coming from a health or psychology background?
Brilliant question.
Any companies you could suggest as well?
God, put me on the spot here. Look, that's a brilliant question, because I was on a bit of a running joke actually with a manager that I know, who I used to work with at a space company. He's now gone and set up his own space company. And we were talking about space, and I was having a few tequilas one night, and I messaged him and said, what about if we were to distill some tequila in space? And I'm not sure if anybody saw, but recently there's a French company, I can't remember, I think it is wine. They're looking to make the first wine in space. And the reason why I say all this is because from a medical perspective and a health perspective, we are starting to do more experiments in microgravity. And there are companies that are doing it. Do you know what? I can't think what they're called now, but there are lots and lots of companies that are looking to do it. And we are going to go to Mars. That's going to happen before we know it. And obviously, that's a very different climate. We're also going to be looking at space tourism. So, all the medical advice required for that. But what I'd say is, if you Google, medical projects in space, some companies will come up, but those companies do exist 100%. They're fully commercial. They're making money. There's a company in Switzerland, but I just can't remember what they're called now to save my life. I'm really, really sorry. But yes, those companies do exist. The sector does need people with your skills 100%. Hopefully we can help you to find those companies. But yeah, that's a very, very good question.
It's really good to hear. And it's a really fast-growing area of the sector, and really exciting look into the future. So moving on to a completely different thing now. So a question about computing, and what sort of coding programming languages do you recommend? Is Python the only one? Is that the best? Any other skills that would be in demand in the industry in this area?
Yeah, so Python is a bit of a winner. Every company is looking to use Python for a lot of different reasons. Python, I'd probably say number one. It depends on what you're working on. So if you're looking at Upstream, you're looking at getting a satellite into space. There are different layers of software, of course. If you look at embedded software, C, C++, not a great deal has really changed there, because of course there is a safety critical element, but also anything being put into space, when you launch it, it's going to get very, very, very hot, and it's going to get thrown around a lot, and then it's going to get very, very cold. So you need to write embedded software in a way that's structured and clean. Where the kind of question gets a bit more open-ended is when you look more at the downstream side of it, because this is kind of a fully commercial software tech sector, which is pretty much the same as anything else, really. If you were to think about what software programming languages are needed in other modern tech sectors, they're pretty much all there. I think we're seeing a lot of C++. We're seeing a lot of Python. We're seeing a little bit of Java. From a data science perspective, we're seeing again a lot of Python. A lot of the Python libraries used for AI and machine learning, so TensorFlow, Keras. Really, Python across the board, definitely worth looking at. Outside of that, I'd say C, C++, and Java. But some of these downstream companies are using languages that are so new that I've never heard of them. One, I think it's called Go. Some computer science or software engineering people probably know more about that than I do. But what I'd say is, the more innovative you are, the more up to date you are with the latest, the more of interest you'll be to these companies. So don't be afraid to be online, doing coding challenges, stuff like that. These companies love that.
All right, next question. What areas of the space industry do you think are going to grow the most or the fastest in the next 10 years or so?
Okay, yeah. So that's a really nice question as well, actually. So location-based services is massive. And what I mean by that is any type of business that by using their location, that's kind of the fundamental part of their business. So Uber, Ola Cabs, those kind of businesses, because that's not necessarily what you would consider space. However, by launching a constellation of small satellites into low Earth orbit, it kind of turbocharges that offering. It's just going to get more accurate and faster. So that's a big part of it. Another major part of it, which I've talked about a lot actually, is the low Earth orbit constellations themselves. There's companies all over the world that are looking to do this at the moment, where they're effectively designing very small satellites the size of like a loaf of bread. They're launching them and then they're putting them into a geosynchronous constellation, and by doing so, they've kind of covered the Earth. And there's different reasons for this. One company is looking to put a cell tower in space. So ultimately, you'll have perfect phone signal anywhere on Earth. So you could be in the Atlantic, you could be up Mount Everest, you'll have perfect phone signal. Another company are using it for autonomous vehicles. Another company are using it for 5G. So those design and build and launch of those constellations is massive. And I definitely say that the third area is Earth observation. I keep mentioning it. It really is red hot. Because before, back in the day, we used to just, it would take about 10 years for NASA, the European Space Agency, to build a very large spacecraft that would go way out into orbit. And, the further away you are from something, the more of it you can see. And it wasn't until recently that this low Earth orbit disruption happened. And by doing that, we can really map the Earth faster, better, more accurately than ever before. So I think a massive, massive growth part of the sector is going to be the use cases for that. So companies kind of switching from their current analytics methods of analyzing. So whether it's the agriculture sector, as I've touched on, the marine sector, as I've touched on, could be the mining sector, it could be literally anything really, the mapping sector. These companies that are taking that data, packaging it and selling it as a service, that will be a massive growth area as well. So location-based services, LEO constellations, and Earth observation. Those for me are the top three sectors at the moment.
Really exciting. That's the last question. Thank you everyone for all your questions. There's a lot more, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Really great questions though. So I'd just like to invite Tom to say any closing comments, and then I'll close the webinar.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Again, the new space sector, it's global, it's exciting. You can use your skills no matter what your background to really help to improve Earth. And I think there's a lot in modern culture, quite rightly so, about what's happening with the planet. I think we've got a real opportunity here to really help to improve Earth and to use your skills to the good. And by getting into the space sector now, sooner or later, companies are going to realize that they're actually all space companies because they need to use a satellite. And you guys can really, really be ahead of the curve on that by getting into these space companies now. So yeah, I wish you all the best on it. And if there's any feedback or comments on what would be useful in future sessions, then please just let us know. Our contact information is there. Feel free to reach out with any of the questions as well.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you everyone here for joining us. I hope you found this useful. Because this is the first event like this that we've done, your feedback is really important to us. So if you're on the website, you should see a link to a short feedback form beside or below the video, and we'd be really grateful if you could fill this in now. To find out more about these and other events that we run, follow spacecareers.uk on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and sign up to the UK SEDS newsletter via ukseds.org. So yeah, as Tom said, we're looking to do some more of these sessions in the future, so it'd be great if you could let us know some of your ideas. With that, I'd like to thank everyone again and bring this webinar to a close. So thank you very much, and see you next time.